This is the Enrichment Sports Source with your host, John Pennington.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Enrichment Sports Source. Tennessee ends the football season on a good note with a 27-14 victory at Kentucky last night. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the season as a whole. We'll look at next year's schedule. We'll warn you, it's not pretty. We'll also talk some basketball. Tennessee loses to UTEP, then wins their next two down in the Bahamas. We'll talk to Mark Pankratz about that. It should be a packed show as usual. This segment, as always, brought to you by the founders of the feast here coming off Thanksgiving, Enrichment Federal Credit Union. Car buyers, you need to refinance your car with Enrichment Federal Credit Union if you haven't financed with them to begin with. They have auto rates starting as low as 1.99% fixed APR, 1.99% fixed APR on all 2009 through 2013 models, up to 66 months to repay. That's actually 2014 models as well. Up to 66 months to repay. And if you finance through some other lender, move the loan and you'll get up to $200 cash back and that great rate to repay over 66 months, up to 66 months. Enrichment Federal Credit Union, we tell you about them every week. Best way to bank in all of East Tennessee, 8 Knoxville area locations. See for yourself. Go to enrichmentfcu.org or stop by any one of those branches and you will be impressed. All right, I want to tell you who's coming up on today's show. I mentioned one already. Chuck Cavaleris, Vince Ferrara, Sterling Hinton, Mark Pankratz, Bobby Scott. So we got football, we got basketball, and we'll start it off talking football, of course, with the three guys on the panel with me right now. We have Jimmy Himes from Sports Animal 990. We have Bob Hodge, freelance contributor to the Knoxville News Sentinel. We have former Vol defensive lineman who's already fired up today, Shazan Bradley. All right, Tennessee went to Lexington with absolutely nothing to play for. I mean, we can say play for pride, but that rarely works in the SEC. Kentucky was playing for pride. There's enough said. They didn't have much to play for. They went up there a couple of years ago under Derek Dooley with they had a bowl on the line. They quit. They laid down. They absolutely flatlined. That did not happen this time around. I say you got to give some credit to the team for not throwing in the towel. I think it's a good sign for Butch Jones. However, I realize that could be viewed as a stretch. You shouldn't quit anyway. Shazan, I'll start with you. Is that a real positive or am I reaching?
Definitely a real positive. I mean, the most important thing that a father could ever teach his son is to never quit. And one thing about it is quitters never win and winners never quit. And you got to think about it. This senior class, they have 43, 44 total coaches over 4 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot. There's no continuity here. It's nothing.
Yeah. Is it a real thing for them to
I'm
quit?
going to throw in with Shazan. I think it is a real thing. You don't quit because of what's happened in the past 3 years under the Dooley regime, where I think they did quit. And so you're looking for them to make baby steps forward, and that is a baby step forward. Okay, there is nothing to play for. You're not going to a bowl game, but you went out there and you played hard. And I think last year before, you saw teams that didn't do that. So, yes, I think that's positive.
I do too, and from this perspective too, I agree with Bob. They did quit under Dooley with no consequences.
Good point.
And now I think there would have been consequences, but they had done it before and no big deal. But going up there, it's cold. You can't get to a bowl game. Your goals are gone. I give them some credit for that. And I agree with something you said earlier about how, okay, are you stretching to give somebody credit for playing hard because you're always supposed to play hard? But we see that in other college players. We see it in the NFL where teams lay down when there's nothing on the line. So I'm going to give them some credit for that.
All right, good point. Here's somebody else we can give some credit to right off the bat before we talk a little bit more about last night's Kentucky game. The senior class. Been a lot of stuff made about that group and more losses than any other senior class and all that stuff, and they're going to have to wear that forever. However, those that were there on last night, they didn't quit not only last night, but for their entire career. One of the reasons Tennessee has struggled last couple of years, you've had so much attrition. You've had all those coaches you talked about. You've had players wash in, wash out. I think Butch Jones did a good job of not coming in and just running people off. I don't think he could with that roster. But even Mark Stoops at Kentucky came in and there was a purge. You didn't see that this year. And these guys that stayed, I mean, you win or lose, you kind of have to tip your hat that they stayed through a lot of bad times. And I think by them staying, it prevented some worse times. Because if you lose a few more of those seniors, some of them turn pro early somehow or just say, I'm getting out of here. I don't know that you're even 5-7 this year.
Well, I think a good case in point of that is Rajon Neal. I mean, he rushed for over 1,000 yards. I didn't realize Tennessee had a 1,000-yard rusher just in 2010. I thought it felt like 1997 to me since Tennessee had a 1,000-yard rusher. But he came in, and it seemed like every year he was going to get more chances than he did, and then he kind of fell back on the depth chart. And for him to come in and have the season that he was able to have, I think goes to the whole not quitting thing, and I think it goes to what these seniors were able to do when they had an opportunity against talent that was somewhat more equal to them than what they faced in so many weeks.
One thing to me, too, is that Butch Jones didn't give up on the seniors. He didn't come in and say, all right, I'm rebuilding, you're not going to play. So they didn't give up on him. And here's what's going to happen forward in that regard to me. These guys are going to come back and be great ambassadors for Tennessee because of Butch Jones. They wouldn't have done it for the previous coach. They'll do it for this guy. And I think that's only going to help Tennessee continue to build a program and continue to recruit well.
Guys, we've talked about this year that there appears to be a talent gap, speed gap, when Tennessee went up against the upper echelon. I thought you saw last night, in some ways you sit there and you feel sorry for Kentucky because I think there's a talent speed gap between Kentucky and Tennessee. I looked at that game last night, Shazan, it tells me a lot of people out there think Tennessee's at the rock bottom of the SEC. I still think they're a little closer to the Vanderbilts of the world, the Mississippi States of the world, that this team with a different schedule would have gone bowling when you look at that talent difference I saw last night.
Well, you know, and that's, like I say, it was a learning experience for everybody. The coaches, the players, the seniors, the guys that stayed. These guys didn't have to stay. They could have ran out of here, went to UT Chattanooga. Someone could have quit and went where have you. But these guys aren't just vols for life. These guys are vols for eternity. And
that's a new one, VFEs.
I mean,
when they get to Valhalla.
Yeah, Sterling over there's already trademarking VFE. But you looked at that team, though. They stuck through it, and I thought it paid off last night when you finally go up against a Kentucky team that you had an advantage on. And I want to show you some stats here about the explosive Vols, and I think this backs up what we're talking about. Tennessee on the season had 13 sacks. You remember the question, will they get 16?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they didn't. Going into last night, they didn't. 13 sacks on the year, averaging 1 per game. They had 5 last night. Corey Miller breaks Reggie White's record and has 4.5 by himself. You heard Miller's name more time last night than you have all season. 20-yard or more plays. Tennessee, 40 on the season going into last night, 3.6 a game. That's 12th best in the SEC. They had 6 against Kentucky. Plays of 30 or more yards. They only had 16 all year, 1 a game. That was 13th in the SEC. They had 5 last night. I just think that goes back when you go back and look at the Auburn and Missouri games, you saw them putting up those kind of big numbers on Tennessee because they had more speed. I think you saw last night that number to me tells me that there is a talent speed gap between Tennessee and the Kentucky and Arkansas. I think Tennessee, if I were to lump them in a group, I would lump them in the group with a Mississippi State or a Vanderbilt that's going bowling and might not be the best team, but they made it to a bowl. I just think the schedule caught this Tennessee team. They weren't quite good enough to master all these top 10 teams they faced.
Agreed.
Oh, good.
I mean, it's that simple. I think that Tennessee, we've talked about it all season, they just didn't have the speed, the quickness, and a couple of the other intangibles that come with that these other teams did. And I mean, people can yell about the coaching and they yell about this, they can yell about the effort. I mean, in the end, you can only be as good as you can be.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Let's trade 1-11 UMass off Vanderbilt's schedule for Oregon on Tennessee's schedule. Tennessee's going bowling. Even with the loss to Vanderbilt, they'd still be going bowling. And the loss to Vanderbilt was this close on a call that should or shouldn't have, may have got it right, but it shouldn't have been made. Yeah. Your thoughts, Jimmy, on this team, and where does it stack in the SEC?
Well, I think you're right about the talent level. It's in the bottom third. But I think Vanderbilt and Tennessee are pretty equal. Mm-hmm. And if Vanderbilt had played Tennessee's schedule, I'm not sure Vanderbilt would have made it to a bowl game. They beat one team with a winning record this year.
Same as last year. And in the regular season, Vanderbilt last year didn't beat anybody with a winning record regular season. So I think Tennessee's obviously they have to upgrade the talent level, but I think you're right about where they are. The key thing going forward, they've got to get better quarterback play, and they've got to find a stud running back, because I think a stud running back can help overcome some of the offensive line deficiencies they're going to face next year. They should have him in Jalen Hurd if he's healthy and if he can stay healthy. And in the SEC, that's always a question mark. When we come back, we're going to talk about some hot topics, including one last stat that Tennessee can hold on to. Vol fans can hang on to one last stat that is still out there. We'll tell you what it is. Come on back on the Enrichment Sports Source.